Like 6 o'clock. Yep. If you're looking to see it, great. Is this on? Good. It's 6 o'clock. I will call the special meeting of the Salina City Commission to order. With that, I would ask staff for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will have roll call.
Mayor Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Franz.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Okay. With that, all that are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Housekeeping things before we get started. If you would like, there are masks as you entered the chapel if you want one and do not have one. Also, I was going to go ahead, although the cold roll, we'll go ahead and just have everyone, I'll start to my right, introduce themselves as to who they are.
Mike Sprague, City Manager.
Melissa Hodges, City Commissioner.
Mike Hoppick, Mayor.
Carl Ryan, City.
Rod Friend, City Commissioner. Stephen Davison, Senior.
Brad Nelson, Chief of Police.
Thank you. Also, if you have an agenda in front of you, we will be covering today items under 3.2. The 3.3 are additional talking points that may be handled at a different time. And then we will also have the 3.4, the listening session, which will be an open mic for anyone who would like to speak at that time. With that, we graciously had an individual that stated that they would serve as our moderator tonight, and I will have a little bio that I would like to read about him. It is Bishop Stephen Davison, is the senior pastor of Living World International Ministries in Salina, Kansas. A native of Alabama, he was born and raised in Frisco City, Alabama, to Elder Edward and Hattie Davidson. He is the eldest of 6 children. Pastor Davidson met his lovely wife, Margaret, in 1983, where they were high school sweethearts. On August 15th, 1986, they were married. They have been married for 33 years. They have 2 beautiful adult daughters and 1 lovely granddaughter, who ministries alongside him to support his vision of God has placed in his heart. Bishop Davison graduated from Central Christian College in McPherson, Kansas, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management and Organizational Leadership. Bishop Davison joined the U.S. Army in 1984. He served in the Army for 11 years. He served his country in the Persian Gulf War and achieved numerous military achievements and awards. Bishop Davidson's duty station in Germany marked a very important turn in his life. It was in a church in Germany where he accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Prior to leaving Germany, Pastor Davidson received the call to be a minister of the gospel. In November of 1991, Bishop Davidson was reassigned to Fort Riley, Kansas. Because of the scarcity of housing at Fort Riley area, Bishop Davison found a home in Salina, Kansas. In March of 1992, Bishop Davison met Pastor, now Bishop, Dr. Charles R. Williamson, Jr. at a local COGIC district meeting. This meeting was not by incident, but by divine appointment. This meeting marked another very vital point in history. On May 31st, 1992, 8 people gathered in the home of Clarence and Wanda Williams, and through much prayer, the interdenominational Living World Church, now Living Word International Ministries was founded. In March of 1996, Bishop Davison was appointed as senior pastor of Living Word of Christ Church, now Living Word International Ministries, Salina. Now as a bishop in the Living Word Covenant Fellowship, he oversees the Southwest region, where he currently oversees 8 churches located in Texas. As a bishop, he strives to build pastoral relations by assisting pastors in their local church, building a strong and united ministry. Bishop Davidson has a love for people, regardless of their backgrounds. He pastors a church that is known for its love and as a house of healing and restoration, changing lives through God's Word. Bishop Davidson values family and strong united relationships among the brethren. His his ultimate love is for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the desire to see souls enter into the kingdom of God. With that, we'd like to thank Bishop Davidson for being here and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Hoppak, for the introduction. I would like to welcome you here today for this forum in reference to police, community, and race relations. During this course, we will hear from Chief Nelson, and he will go over some points that is very important to him. Afterwards, as you heard, we will have an open forum. Some of the things that we definitely want to do is be respectful as well as courteous. So at this time, I am going to introduce Chief Nelson. Chief Brad Nelson was appointed as police chief December 2nd, 2013, after retiring from Columbia, Missouri Police Department. Chief Nelson served over 20 years with the Columbia Police Department, where he earned the rank of captain and was a commander in all 3 Columbia Police Department divisions: patrol, investigation, and administration. Chief Nelson began his career in Excelsior Springs, Missouri Police Department in 1984 and rose to the rank of sergeant prior to being hired by the Columbia Police Department in 1992. Chief Nelson is a graduate of Northwestern Police Staff and Command School and the FBI's National Academy. Chief Nelson is an active member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and a Kansas Associate of Chief of Police, executive board member. Chief Nelson has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration from Central Missouri State University and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Missouri, Columbia. All told, Chief Nelson has 35 years of law enforcement experience in 2 states. Chief Nelson served in the United States Air Force Reserve for over 13 years. Chief Nelson was born in Nebraska and has lived in the Midwest his entire life. He is an avid Kansas City Chiefs fan and a Harley-Davidson and Indian motorcycle enthusiast. Chief Nelson has been married to his wife, Tamara, for 33 years, and they have 2 grown children, including 1 son who is a 5-year veteran of the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. Chief Nelson.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the introduction, Pastor Davison, and also for moderating tonight's event. Thank you, Mayor Hoppak and fellow commissioners, for this opportunity, and to KWU for the use of their facilities. I have heard many of the comments, suggestions, and concerns regarding our department over the past several weeks at commission meetings, and it's nice to have the opportunity to respond. I want to be clear, even though I firmly believe we currently have some of the best policies and procedures in place due to our affiliation with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, better known as CALEA, I also believe that there's always room for improvement, and we should never become complacent. It is my pledge to you that as long as any proposed changes in our present policies and procedures do not place my officers or citizens at an increased risk of injury, they will be considered. I would now like to have a brief PowerPoint presentation in which I tried to address the major concerns and or questions posed at prior commission meetings. I would ask that you hold your questions until the completion of my presentation, as many of your inquiries may be addressed on a future slide. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce my senior command staff that's here. If you would just stand up, I'd appreciate it. DC Morton, Deputy Chief Morton, Captain Bill Cox. He's kind of short, you can't see him. Captain Paul Forrester, Captain Gary Hannes, Lieutenant Jim Feldman. I did some quick math, and including my 35 years, we have over 175 years of law enforcement experience. I think that says a lot, 175 years. We'll start with the PowerPoint here. The topics today that we chose, I didn't necessarily choose those. Those were what we primarily heard during these past 3 commission meetings. We spoke in detail about the law enforcement, maybe not in detail, but we spoke about the LEAB, also known as the Law Enforcement Advisory Board. We talked a lot about use of force. We talked about the federal 1033 surplus program as far as what we possess, what we have possessed. And we certainly had some conversation about our current hiring and training topics. We're not limited to those topics, and I didn't handpick or cherry pick those topics. Those are what seemed to come up the most in the previous 3 commission meetings. We'll first talk about the Law Enforcement Advisory Board. That was actually created in 2007 by then Chief James D. Hill. It was a result of some legislation that came out of Topeka, which specifically addressed the subject of racial and other profiling. You can see there the bullets as far as what it required, but it did establish at that time a governor's task force on racial profiling. It definitely spoke about any unlawful use or unlawful for any law enforcement officer or police agency to engage in racial profiling. In addition, found inside that legislation was a requirement for all first-class cities, which Salina is a first-class city, to form a independent citizens advisory board. That's why it was formed in 2007 by Chief Hill, because it was mandated by this legislation. You can read what was found within that bill. That's how they described it. And by reading that and comparing it to the mission statement of the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, you can definitely see that there's some verbiage that just got copied over into the mission statement. So again, that was a requirement for all first-class cities in 2007. You can see a picture there of our current LEAB members. Several are here. Is Bridget Weiser here? I wish we would have been in the picture. Anyway, she's here. She actually works at KWU too. This is their scope of work, what they do. It is a advisory to the Chief of Police and to Sheriff Sultan. It's non-binding. It appears to be very similar to our city's present discipline advisory board in that it is non-binding. This shows there what it does. And at that point in 2007, we were able to find minutes from the first meeting that the Law Enforcement Advisory Board had where legal counsel advised that it was not subject to the Kansas Open Meetings Act. That's been kind of a point of, I don't want to say contention, but it's definitely been questioned as to why the meetings weren't announced and such. It's because they were not subject to the Open Meetings Act in 2007, and they're still not open. But there's nothing similar or sinister as to why this wasn't published. It's just how the board was set up, and that's how we've continued since 2007. These are definitely not all the options. These are just what came to mind when I was preparing this PowerPoint presentation as far as what we could do, what we could consider. Status quo, sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. That's for us to decide. When I say us, I mean the citizens to decide. We could approve it as a city board, which would change quite a bit as far as the city, the mayor specifically would be responsible for picking, choosing those on the board. We could look at what other peer communities are doing. I came from Columbia, Missouri, as you heard in my bio, and they had a CRB, a Citizens Review Board. They had one there too, so I do have some experience with CRBs. In many cities, they are called Civilian Oversight Boards, but Citizen Review Board is what I'm used to as far as title goes. And again, that's not an exhaustive list of options. That's just options that came to my mind when I was doing this PowerPoint. I talk a lot about CALEA. About what I can say, if you haven't looked up CALEA, please do so. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying it's what's out there that gives us credit for our policies and procedures as far as that they are accepted as a best practice. It doesn't mean they can't be changed. It doesn't mean they can't be better. It just means at this point in time, they're considered to be the best practices. As you can see, they've been around since 1979. It was joint efforts of these four major executive boards and such, as far as that got together and did a lot to do with the formation of CALEA. IACP, I'm a member of that. The National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, the National Sheriff's Association, and PERF, Police Executive Research Forum. They all had input on CALEA, and that's why we can say they are considered to be the best practice at this time as far as policies and procedures. And it's not just the written word, it's also where they come in and inspect to see if we're actually doing what the policies say. Because obviously your policies can say anything, but if you don't follow them, it's just a piece of paper with words on it. So we definitely are, we can confirm that we are following the policies we have, and we presently have 136 policies that are reviewed. This probably is what draws the most attention, is our use of force policy. Presently, we have a use of force policy that's been in place for 25 years, but it does not mean it's the exact same policy. Policies evolve over time. I mean, there's no doubt that there's going to be some policy changes because of recent world events and recent events that's happened here in our own country. It's 13 pages long. I don't know how many of you read that, but it's 13 pages long. It is accredited by CALEA, as I said. In 2017, I believe, on our own initiative, we had a outside law group go over our 13-page policy, and they looked at it in detail, and we did that, like I said, on our own initiative. Made a few tweaks, but overall they were very pleased with our policy. These are just some numbers, and I didn't cherry pick numbers. These are the actual numbers. In 2019, your officers arrested 2,277 people. Of these 2,277 arrests, we used force 67 times, or force options. When I say force options, that can be anything from a wrist lock to being tased to using mace, OC mace, all the way up to actually using your firearm. So it's used 167 times. That constitutes 7% of the time that we made arrests, force was used. That's for you to decide if 7% is high or low. But what I can say is 7%, that's of the people that were actually arrested. I can assure you that everything changes when I call it the magic words with people's behavior. Everything changes as far as when we utter the words, "You're under arrest." All right? When we say you're under arrest, automatically things kick in, such as fight or flight, or do what you're being asked to do. But the magic words are, "You're under arrest." So truly, whatever happens before those magic words happen, as far as the disposition, the attitude, how nice the person was, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what occurs after the officer says those words, "You're under arrest." That's why that's in there. In 2019, you may be surprised that we had over 45,000 contacts with citizens. That's 45,000 times we contacted citizens in some manner. If you use that 167 figure of the times we use force, that equals 0.37% of the time that we actually use force. So 0.37% is how many times your Salina officers actually had to use force. This was something that I don't know if this was out before recent incidents, but I personally had not heard of the 8 Can't Wait program, which is a project by Campaign Zero, but I of course became very familiar with it after being asked, "Do you follow these requests?" And these are 8 specific items that they're asking questions, yes or no, do you have that in your policy? I'm proud to say that I believe we cover all 8 in our policy, and I'll go over that. But I will say one quote that I found from their website. Research shows more restrictive use of force policies can reduce killings by police and save lives. I don't know how I can argue that. That's absolutely true. Tell your city to adopt all of these policies. Chokeholds It wants a ban on chokeholds, specifically our policy, again, the 13-page policy I spoke of, General Order 02102. Chokeholds or neck restraints with or without a device that restricts a person's airway are prohibited. That's pretty clear.
Required de-escalation. De-escalation of force is moving to a lesser force option on the use of force continuum. Officers shall de-escalate force at the earliest opportunity to do so safely. I've told some people this, but I can recall de-escalation is not a new thing. Some people act like that's something new. I can remember in the 90s serving search warrants in Columbia, Missouri, and you go in and you take control and you put people in handcuffs, and then you'd always hear the sergeant saying, dial it down, dial it down. So to me, dial it down is de-escalation. They're just using a different word. But please don't fall into the misconception that de-escalation is something new. We've always de-escalated to some degree. That's just a new terminology. Require warning shots before shooting. Our policy specifically states where feasible, the officer should identify himself and give training of the intent to use deadly physical force. I will say when I read that, what I took out of that was that we clearly, when able, we will give warning. But I was surprised that it was gender specific. That just shows you how we continually have to review our policies. That obviously should say himself/herself, right? So that's just an example of these 136 policies. I don't know how many pages are. I don't know if anybody knows, but there's hundreds and hundreds of pages. But that's an example of me just reading that tells me we have to change that. I have no trouble telling you that we will change that. This is all alternatives before shooting. Only the amount of force that is reasonable and necessary to accomplish a lawful police objective shall be applied, and use of force shall cease immediately upon accomplishment of the police objective. That is found in our policy description of the same policy, use of force. Duty to intervene, that's something that's always been there too, but people tend to think that that's something that just came out, possibly because of what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. That's also simply not true. The duty to intervene has been there for decades. Ours specifically says each and every member of the department is charged with the responsibility to monitor and control the use of force during operations involving multiple officers. And multiple officers, the perfect example of what took place in Minneapolis. Supervisory and non-supervisory personnel alike will be held strictly accountable to intervene, halt, and report any use of force perceived to be excessive. Somebody, I recall, one of the meetings asked what the consequence of the words we violated had. It's anything up to and including termination. That's what could happen if you do not fulfill this policy duty to intervene. You can be fired. Ban shooting and moving vehicles. That's something that's been around for a long time too. This specifically says in policy an officer is not justified in discharging a firearm under the following circumstances. And it talks about firing a moving vehicle unless the occupants of the vehicle represent an imminent threat to the life of the officer or others, and then it shall be done only as a last resort. I think that makes perfect sense. I don't think you can say unequivocally never can you do that, because there are instances where officers are dragged down the road and their only choice to be being killed possibly by being dragged is to fire their weapon. So I don't think you can ban it completely, but in an instance where you're trying to save yourself or others' life, that is an alternative we have. Establish use of force continuum. We've had a use of force continuum since the 1990s. The KOATC, the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Academy, they teach force continuum. It's part of their 14-week basic training academy. And for those who read the rather lengthy packet that we put out last Thursday, the entire course curriculum from KOATC was included in that if you want to look at it. And we didn't have it. I actually called the director at KOATC and he provided me with that within minutes. So I was pleased by that. Require all force to be reported. Absolutely. If we use force, it's going to be reported in some manner, but we specifically state there. I won't read each one of those, but we specifically state when you have to do a report. And if you want to boil it down, it's basically if you use force, you're going to do a report, a use of force report. Even if it sounds a little weird, the forced entry into secured buildings, that's force. Well, it's because we forced entry and caused damage to your castle or to your business. That's why we even require a report in those instances. Okay, this was in our use of force guidelines. I thought it was important. Unreasonable search and seizure, Fourth Amendment. It talks a lot about reasonableness, and we could discuss this all day as far as what's reasonable. What's reasonable to me may not be reasonable to you, obviously, but this is what we have to live under. And if you can read this, it's pretty clear. I didn't write it. I mean, it's pretty clear. A lawyer did that, and we have to understand it. That's what we have to deal with. And that's what's in our use of force policy. Definitely, I started being a police officer in 1984. I knew there was a reasonable risk I could be hurt, and I accepted that risk. We all accept the risk that we can be hurt, and we understand that. And if we didn't understand that, if we were so paranoid about possibly being injured, do you know what would happen, folks? What would happen is we would never leave the station because we're so scared of being hurt. We don't do that. We understand, we accept the risk, that there is a risk. However, I don't think you would expect us to have an unreasonable risk. In other words, I don't think that's expected, and I have to place myself in an unreasonable risk of death or injury to myself or to my fellow officers. That's that topic. The next topic we'll talk about. And again, I know you have questions. I want to hear the questions, but just in the hope that maybe we'll cover them in a slide if you wait till I'm done. I appreciate that. This became the 1033 program. I would say this really picked up steam as far as being controversial after the Ferguson incident, the Ferguson riots, the Ferguson shooting, etc. It became to the forefront. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit in slides, but it became to the forefront because of the pictures, the images that were broadcast nationwide, and all of these armored vehicles. That's where they came from. I think this is pretty clear to show you a little bit of history. We began our process as far as procuring equipment in 1993 with 4 sets of binoculars. The most items we ever received, as it says there, were 16 AR-15s, which those in the military knows what those are. But I can't tell you those were of such quality. We gave them back the same year we received them. So yeah, we received 16 rifles, but we returned them back to the federal government within a year because they were really poor quality. Our APC, Armored Personnel Carrier, we received that in 2012. I heard several comments during the commission meetings over the past 3 weeks that it was $200,000. Well, the whole purpose of the military surplus program is to provide equipment to local law enforcement and save the city taxpayers money. So it did not cost the city of Salina $200,000. They say it's free, but you have to pay for the transportation. And that vehicle, to get that transported on a flatbed truck, it cost $5,000 to bring that to Salina. And we obtained that in 2012. We have, the only equipment we have from the 1033 program today is that APC. We're going to cover the APC here in a minute, but that's the only piece of equipment we have from this program. Not because I think the program is bad, it's because we didn't need it anymore. A lot of the equipment you receive is obsolete. A lot of it's in condition worse than you thought it was. And you don't get to shop through the closet and pick out what you want. You get what you get. And a lot of this stuff is so obsolete. When we get it, we turn around and send it back. One of the bigger items that we had when I got here was we all know what a Humvee is, I think. We had a Humvee that was stored in a garage out at our range. And other than the rats and the snakes and stuff enjoying it, we never used it. So I made the decision to give it back. So we gave it back, I think, in 14 or 15. And Humvee's 1 tonnage or something. It's definitely a military vehicle. The purpose of APCs, I can say that I was a member of Columbia's SWAT team for 10 years, so I think I'm not saying I probably might be considered a subject matter expert, but I'm not saying I know all. But I do know a lot about SWAT teams. I probably served over 400 search warrants in the time I was there. I know about SWAT equipment, and I can tell you I'm extremely supportive of an APC for this very, very simple reason. It puts a barrier between you and bullets, you as civilians and me as a police officer. It's a mobile barrier for bullets that won't hit my officers or civilians if we have to rescue them. You can see that APCs in the past they've been shot at, and if that wasn't there, whoever was sitting in that driver's seat would have been shot. But you can clearly see it's bulletproof glass. Safe communication
communication between negotiator and suspect. That's because we put our negotiators inside our APC and put them up front so they can see what's going on and they can talk to the suspects inside the house. So it definitely protects the negotiators too because they're inside the actual APC. Mobile cover, that's pretty self-explanatory. Psychological factor, I can explain that. That's a psychological factor to the actual suspects when they look out the window and see R specifically is over 8 foot tall and it weighs 8.5 tons. In my experience in Columbia, there was at least 2 occasions where literally people surrendered because we brought the APC to that location. And folks, I think that's what you want. Nobody's hurt. They retired because they knew, oh, they're serious. They brought this APC here. But with that said, we only bring it out when needed, which I'll cover that shortly too. Like I said, I got ahead of myself. This picture, I can remember this happened in 2014, and as you know, I'm from Missouri. St. Louis is 120 miles to the east, so I was pretty familiar with that area. It broke my heart when I saw this picture, but do you know why? Look at the guy on top with the rifle. He's using his scope as binoculars. I saw that in 2014 and told my wife, that is terrible optics, not to be coy, but he's using a scope as binoculars, and that is terrible. He's looking at somebody, I assume, but the image of him using his rifle pointing apparently at civilians on top of that APC, that's horrible. If I was a sergeant there, if I was on scene, I would immediately said, put your darn rifle down, and if you got to look at the crowd, use binoculars, not your rifle. That makes sense? And I might add, these vehicles here, those were not acquired from the 1033 program. Those are actual civilian APCs that a company out of Massachusetts sees. But the average person, every time they see an APC, they think it's part of the 1033 program, and these are not part of the 1033 program. This is our APC. These are the concerns I heard about. Basically, does Salina need one? And if so, how often do you ever use it? Well, the answer is, in my humble opinion, yes, we need one, and rarely do we use it, folks, but that's a good thing, okay? That's a good thing. We rarely have to break it out. We use it when there's a potential for armed encounter is elevated, and primarily that's decided by if we're doing high-risk search warrants and the guy who we're going after has a known weapons violation, or he's a known convicted felon, or he's assaulted police officers in the past. We are going to use it for those reasons. I am the chief of police. I do make these decisions with Captain Honest. We decide when we're going to break out, for lack of a better term, the APC, but there is a lot of thought before we do it because we don't want to bring a sledgehammer when we could use a fly swatter. In all of 2019, we used it 5 times total, 5 times. And you can see what we used it for. We don't use it just, we have to create policy because cops do stupid things, okay? And in other cities in the world, cops were using their APCs basically so they could hang on the sides, like a fireman and look cool. And that ruined it for a lot of people. We don't use our APC just for transportation from point A to point B. We bring it and we get it out when we need it. I think it's very similar to the Salina Fire Department having a lot of specialty vehicles, such as our hazmat truck, such as their, I wish I could recall what it's called, but it's their heavy equipment truck. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have these huge trucks. You don't see them much, but when they need it, they use it. They have it. That's why I said in there, better to have the APC and not need it than to have it, than to not have it and need it. I think that's very true. Also, as you can see there, we responded to over 45,000 calls again in 2019. The usage of this APC 5 times represents 0.01% where the APC was actually out and about. Now, with that said, out and about on law enforcement purposes. It's definitely out and about other times, but that's by design, that's by choice. I want people to know we have this. I don't want them to see it and say, oh my God, what is that? The military's coming. I want them to clearly know that it's our vehicle that we have out there, and that's why we use it at many community events. To include, sometimes we're asked to be at these community events. They're asking for that big vehicle. An APC is not a tank. I can tell you, I can recall vividly in 2014, Jake Tapp, I think is his name, CNN, every single APC he saw, he called it a tank. and that drove me crazy because all it does is inflame people's mind about, oh my God, the police are using tanks. They're not tanks, and that's why I have this slide. That's our APC. That is clearly a tank. So I say that not trying to be coy. I'm just saying it's not a tank. And I don't know why, but it really bothers me when every armored PC, every armored vehicle, the media responds and calls it a tank. This is how much we've used our APC in the past 4 years, 3.5 years. We've used it on 49 occasions, and you can see the 21 times for law enforcement operations. We have to train on it. This is an 8.5-ton vehicle. We have to train. So we train on it. We train dismounting it. We train get on it. I mean, the biggest thing is you don't want to fall out of the thing because you can get hurt. We've also used it 12 times, like I said before, in public relations events. Here's a couple examples. That is the true values. We had our recruitment Mustang. We had one of our motor units, and we had the APC. We literally have people bypass the Mustang to stand in line to see this APC and to get in and take pictures inside it. Okay, our next topic, as far as hiring, we had some questions about our hiring and training practices. I'm not going to read this to you, but I'll leave it up there long enough where hopefully you can read. It's basically, to summarize, it's telling you for the past 3, 4, 5 years, I've definitely known how difficult it was to both recruit and retain qualified police officers. It's terribly hard. The pool of applicants is getting smaller. The pool of applicants is getting less qualified or less interested. I mean, I literally can remember talking to people, asking them if they had never fired a gun before, and they said no. And that's almost mind-boggling. You don't have to be an expert, but the fact that you've never fired a gun before and you want to be a police officer, it's like they almost just woke up one morning and decided they wanted to be a cop. And that's like, wow. I mean, me specifically, I can tell you, when I was in 9th grade, I knew I was going to be a cop. I don't know why, because nobody in my family, either side, were cops. But I think it was because all I read was Hardy Boy books, and all I saw was Starsky and Hutch. I think that's why. I don't know, but I've enjoyed it. I do love being a police officer. I say this a lot. I enjoyed as much as I did in 1984, but the difference is now I know what I'm doing, and I really do believe that. This is our hiring process. It's extremely long process, although we've tried to shorten it because we were losing applicants because it's taking too long. And City B was hiring before we were, so we have to make the time shorter. I think in the packet I said 1 month. That's pushing it. I would say 1 to 2 months is how long it takes to do every one of these processes. I will say that the background investigation is done by a retired Detective Randy Jennings, who has over 25 years experience. So if he's going to find something, he's going to find it. A lot of things we do before they're offered a job to be a Salina police officer, I can assure you. These two are at Law Enforcement Academy right now. We were asked about retention trends. It's hard to retain cops. I mean, a lot of it's because of what's going on right now. A lot of it's because of the anger we see on social media. I have to tell them constantly that is a minority of folks that don't like you. The majority still support law enforcement, but we sure seem to hear more from that folks that don't like us. But this is our retention trends. I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but I think we I don't want to say we hit bottom, but in 2017 we recognized the problem, and in 2017 we started doing some things differently, including myself. I'm always about change if it'll help. I can tell you it's hard to keep cops happy, but you can see the upward trend. Today we have 83 police officers. That is the most in the history of Salina Police Department, and I'm very, very proud of that. We need one more, so if anybody knows anybody else, we'll have 84. But that's our trend in maintaining. We spend so much money on training these folks, and to have them leave after 3 years because they're burned out or they hate the job or they're tired of being spit on or called bad names, it's a heck of an investment that we're losing after 3 years, and we're doing everything we can not to lose these folks. This is a pretty good slide, I think, that tells you how difficult it is for us to find qualified applicants. In 2019, 224 people took the time to apply, and we even made it so easy you could apply online. Okay, so they're applying online. They don't even have to come to HR. Out of those 224 people, a mere 104 took the time and the energy to come actually take the written test. So less than half of the people that applied actually came to take the test. Of that less than half, I guess it's 47%, only 49 passed the written test. So now you started at 224, you're down to 49 people that potentially could be a Salina police officer. And in 2019, of those 49 that actually passed, we hired 15 of those officers. I mean, that's a pretty good snapshot of what it's like, I would say nationwide, but that is the norm as far as, in that 224, when I applied in 1984, we had 350 some people apply in Columbia, Missouri for no jobs. There weren't even jobs open. It was for an eligibility roster. So we went from 300 and some applying for eligibility roster to this today. And that saddens me. As far as our training goes, most of it's guided by CPOST as far as they tell us what training we have. They mandate what training occurs at the Law Enforcement Academy in Hutch. It's actually Yoder, but in Hutch. They have the curriculum, which is included in the packet again. So 560 hours of training is what a Kansas police officer receives before they're even eligible to come back to the station and start their field training program. And to put that in perspective, when I started, it was 3 weeks. So it was 120 hours, and I was given a gun and the power to arrest. Fast forward 35 years, we're at 560 hours. That's quite a difference. You never stop training. You never stop learning. I pride myself on learning something every day. In fact, when I learn something every day, I tell the people, I did not know that. I just learned that today. So never, ever, ever stop learning. We're required to obtain 40 hours of continual training each year. And if you don't get that training, your certification is revoked. So there's a pretty strong motivation to get that training. There's a list of the mandatory training we receive. Again, it's for the length of the career. It never stops. That specifically talks about basically what we wear on our belt. Everything we wear on our belt, we have to be trained annually, recertified annually on everything you see on a belt. OC, taser, weapon, ASP, everything we have, we retrain annually every year because we understand it's that important. And lastly, what I would say, if you really want to know what it's like to be as close as you can without becoming one, please consider attending our Citizens Academy. We have them every year. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about them. I mean, we tweak them because they critique them. But I'm just saying, there's no better way to show what we do and the Saline County Sheriff's Department does on a daily basis than attending one of these academies. And our next academy is in August. I think it's August 12th. I don't have the date, but when we have an exact date and we're waiting for applicants, normally around 30 to 35 applicants, trust me, I'll put it on our Facebook page, and please apply. And I guarantee it'll change your, I don't say your opinion, but it'll change your view of what your police officer do on a daily basis. And I believe that is the last slide. I try not to kill you by PowerPoint, but that's the last slide I have.
Thank you, Chief Nelson, for your presentation. Prior to allowing people to come up, I want to apologize to the commissioners. I did not acknowledge you simply because I did not look at my notes. I didn't follow my notes, so I apologize about that. At this particular time, if you have a question that you would like to present, or if you have a statement you would like to present, I would ask that you would please come to the mic in the front and that you would ask the question or the statement that you have.
Excuse me, Pastor, if I could break in, there are... How about now? Better? Okay, thank you. There are disinfectant wipes so that each person who comes to the microphone, you need to adjust the microphone, there's wipes there for you to use.
Yes, it's on.
Is it on? My name is Darrell Wilson. I don't have a question. I just have a statement I want to make. I live at 613 Oakdale Drive here in Salina and have done so the most of my life. I left here during the Second World War with my family and ended up in Denver, Colorado, where I finished my schooling. And from there, I got a nice letter from Harry Truman, the President of the United States, that if they needed me over somewhere. And I went through basic training and learned how to be a soldier and an engineer. And they sent me to Japan, where they taught me how to be a medic and sent me to Korea as a combat medic. I spent nearly 2 years there in Korea during that war. When I came home, I come back to Salina eventually, my hometown. And in 1962, I got the bright idea to become a police officer. So I applied for and was hired by the then Chief Henry S. Salmons, who was really a great man, I thought, and I still think. And my training was, I rode with another officer for a month, and after that month, my uniform arrived, which was a shirt and pants, and I had to buy my own boots and my own leather gear and everything. But then I was given the keys to the car and says, go that way and stay in this area, and that's your job, and so on. That was the training at the time. And I was able to do that. I was able to do that long enough to be promoted to detective, which I wanted to do. That was my goal in life. And I got to be a detective, and I got to be a detective lieutenant, and then I got to be chief of detectives, and then I got to be assistant chief or deputy chief of police. And I retired then in 1984, and in January of 1985, I was sworn in as sheriff of Salina County, Kansas. And my training, of course, was going on all this time in various deals, and training was beginning to pick up at that time for law enforcement officers. And the equipment we got, most of the stuff we had to furnish ourselves at first, and later on it got so the county and the city would buy. When I was sheriff, I was able to get the county to buy more equipment and stuff for the officers and so on. After 12 more years as sheriff, I retired again, and I became the director of the Kansas Sheriff's Association. And in that job, we did training, and we not only deputies throughout the state, but for any law enforcement officer that wanted to come to our free training. We found speakers and so on all over the country to come in and talk to us. And Governor Bill Graves appointed me the chairperson of the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Commission, and I was the chairperson for 8 years in that position before I retired again from the sheriff's office. I wanted to say about the police department and the sheriff's department. I know Chief Nelson. I have talked to him a lot about his duties and about his training, about his recruiting, and he has done a fine job, I think, in Salina, Kansas. And the fellow that took my place a couple terms ago, the sheriff Solden, has also done a fine job, even though I've done a better job than both of them been put together. But I think we have a great police department. I think there's a lot of problem going on in the world of law enforcement today. I watched the news tonight, this afternoon. The mayor of Seattle has decided she was wrong in keeping the law enforcement out of that area that is called CHOP now, where the people have barricaded off and so on. So she decided she was wrong, and which was good, and she sent some workers in to remove the barriers, and they were promptly removed. And also, the thing I don't quite understand is Minneapolis, Minnesota now is going to defund the police. I can't imagine what's going to happen if you don't have any police, and if you think they're going to be there without being paid. I just don't understand what the thinking is of that. We're going through a bad time. We aren't going through a bad time in Salina. I think we got good law enforcement here, and we're very fortunate to have it. It's well funded by the city and the county, and I think we do a good job. And Brad told me that I wouldn't get any tickets if I talked to you tonight, and so I don't know whether he's telling the truth or not. So I know that it's tough, and I know you're coming for some tough decisions you make, and I'm positive or sure you'll make it right.
Thank you, sir. For the next personnel that are coming up, please let's limit our comments to 2 to 3 minutes, because we may have multiple people that may have something they would like to say. Thank you.
Good evening. Hello? Yes. So my name is Reverend D. Williamson, and I have a couple questions I'd like to ask to the police department. One of the things I'm curious about is there extensive psychological testing as a part of the hiring practice before you hire police officers and before they do any training? Because we do that in the work that I do. We do a psychological test on all of our potential clergy people, and so I want to know if you do that with the police before you hire them, to see if there's any red flags, yellow flags, purple flag, whatever.
The answer is yes, absolutely. That's part of the conditional offer is a psychological exam. That's what has to occur, and they have 3 options: either they're recommended, not recommended, or recommended with qualifications. And the short answer is yes, we absolutely do that.
And do you use an outside agency outside of Salina, or
yes,
trained psychological people who do the MMPA and all that?
Yes, ma'am. And I believe it's in Kansas City. Yes.
In Kansas City.
Yes.
Okay. Also, I would like to know, after an officer is involved in an aggressive situation, if they too are drug tested. They usually test those who have been arrested for drugs. Do they test officers as well afterwards, after some aggressive situations? I mean,
well, if there's, I don't know if I understand that. Everybody gets arrested isn't drug tested. That's not necessarily true. But if the officer is showing signs of impairment, or if it's an officer-involved shooting, I believe that's standard operating procedure. But, I mean, as far as if somebody's acting aggressive, do they do a drug test? Generally speaking, the answer is no.
So do you, what was the question? It has to do with that again. Just lost the question.
Well, that is a great question, but generally speaking, our policy states if they're displaying some signs of impairment, that's when we can require a drug test.
For the cop?
Yes. Okay. But generally speaking, just because they were involved in a use of force, we're not going to drug test each officer, no.
So do you do a psychological testing after there has been an aggressive situation or killing or something like that? They've been involved in a shooting, to reassess the psychological abilities of that cop?
After an officer-involved shooting, the answer is yes. But just being aggressive, as you described it, that's kind of a relative term. So I would just say that as far
as
I'm
talking about any shooting,
officer-involved
killing. I mean, killings happen here in Salina as well. There was one that happened last year. That was here. Were those officers put on leave? Were they psychologically tested? Are they back on the street? Was there some extensive evaluation afterwards? Because I know that stuff messes with somebody's psyche. There's PTSD that people may be dealing with. I know military folks deal with it when they've been deployed, and there's firearms shooting and everything. So I want to just know.
Yeah. For all those questions that you said, the answer is yes. They are immediately placed on administrative leave. The investigation is handled by an outside agency, normally the KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They're placed on admin leave for a period of time and before they are medically cleared to include psychological evaluation before they return to duty.
And how long is that time?
Well, it's different. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the KBI. Once we turn investigation over to the KBI, they're the ones who decide to some extent what we're doing with our officer. Because
so you're policed by the KBI that determines how long an officer will be gone?
No, I'm saying it has some input on it. I mean, they have to get the first interview out of the way first.
So then the city, you determine how long they'll be gone?
Well, how long they're gone, but they still have to go through the steps as far as being medically cleared to return.
And so the average away time is what?
I would say a week to 10 days.
A week to 10 days.
I'm just pulling that out, but yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
Sure.
I'm sure I'll have some more questions. I'll go sit back down and let somebody else go.
Anyone else have any questions?
Bill Black, 815 Bruce Street, and in Salina. I think this is probably for Brad, but in a big picture way, we see a clear disparity between people of color who are incarcerated versus the population that they share. And so if there's 5% or 7% African Americans, but there's 20 or 15% incarcerated, I guess my question is, how would you account for that, and do you think there's any kind of maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy in there? And I know it's kind of a sociological question, but I think it's a fair question, and I see it so consistently, it seems, across the nation that I'd just like to know what your thoughts are, and actually any of you. And I'll head back.
I'll be glad to share that question. I would say, I mean, that is a very difficult question. I can say as far as your police officers, we don't decide the race, gender, anything else as far as responding to a call. We have no control over that. As far as the number in prisons, I don't know how to answer that. As far as we also don't convict people either. We arrest people. We don't convict them. We don't put them in prison. So much of that is out of our control. We don't even convict people. We arrest people. So a lot of that, if not all of it, is out of our control as far as whether or not they're convicted and or serve a prison sentence.
Directly to the 1033 program. I'm curious exactly who makes that purchase. Like, I know it's the police department, but who makes that swipe? Is it you? Is it a decision? Do you have to ask your board first? How does that go?
Well, again, Miranda, it's good to see you here. It's not a purchase. We're not purchasing anything. But with that said, if it's something we need, like if we think possibly there's something there that we need, just say but a replacement APC. We would go online to see if there's any APCs available, right?
We as in the chief of police does?
Sorry?
We as in the chief of police? Okay.
Well, I mean, I would assume the SWAT commander, Captain Mahonis, would inform me that we need this and this and this. And if the best way to acquire it at the least cost to the citizens, which is basically free, if we can obtain that from the 1033 program, we will apply to receive that, yes.
Right, so you apply for it, but you don't necessarily need like the city commissioner's approval to apply for military
That is correct.
Surplus. As long as it's under a spending cap, as I'm aware, right?
As long as it's what?
It's as long as it's under like a certain amount of money, right? Do you need an approval to spend more than $5,000?
I do not. That's a great question. What I would say is in 2007, that wasn't part of the equation. So I'm not. I mean, we haven't acquired, other than very small things since I've been here, that we needed to consider that. I would get with my city manager, my boss, and determine whether or not that was needed.
Okay, so then so the storage of the armored vehicle and maintenance, that would come from your city budget, or?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If it's helpful at all, we probably somewhere approach this. Is this on? Now about have it in my mouth. There we go. If it's helpful at all, we apply the same approach to other departments. So the availability of surplus property or donations is currently not viewed as a purchase that rises to a purchasing threshold that goes to the City Commission.
I'm Wayne Westblade. I'm a recent citizen of Salina. I've been a police officer, and I've also been a lawyer. I've been both defense and prosecution, and so I know something about good cops and bad cops. And I think, as I have observed police officers over the years, sometimes some officers concern me if they like arresting people too much, or if a police officer, if I hear them referring to people in their custody as scumbags, it's time to get rid of that officer because he likes his job too well, and he thinks it's his duty to eliminate the scumbags in society. And police officers, now I'm talking about, I have not had much experience with Salina police officers, and with every one that I've met, they have been nothing but courteous, and I respect them. And I think probably Salina has one of the best police that I've ever been familiar with. But when a police officer thinks that he is both judge and jury, he's a danger. He needs to be eliminated. What happened in Minneapolis, it is so obvious that police officer was a bully. He did not respect, he obviously didn't respect that black man in his custody, but I suspect that it didn't stop with black men. I'll bet you he was one of those that called people in his custody a scumbag. And that's, I think mainly, well, one of the things I hope we are not considering in Kansas, or at least in this area, is defunding the police. That is the stupidest thing that could ever happen. Thank you.
Hi, Ann Hoekstra, 2062 Raymond. I'm going to just put this out there. Can you address the blue code of silence, and how does that fit? Does that even fit in with the culture of the Salina Police Department? Because there are bad cops out there. Well, I know that you're supposed to report them. Is it strong? Are your ties to each other stronger than your ties to the citizens?
I would certainly hope the answer is no, it's not. The blue code of silence, I think that is a thing. I think it's diminished greatly over the past 10 years or so. And a lot of it's just because things that are happening that possibly have occurred for years are now being recorded. So, I mean, that's removing a big veil of that going on. I'm ashamed that that's occurred in the past, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's rampant. But there is certainly, I mean, I can tell you if there's such a thing as that, which I've already said there probably is, but I can tell you in my career, I've received 2 tickets, and I'm fine with that. I mean, it is what it is. You get a ticket, you pay for it. But does it occur? Sure. I'm not going to deny that it's there, but I can tell you again, if it happens and I become aware of it, and such as the Minneapolis thing was way to the extreme, but with that said, we certainly have procedures in place that we will deal with it, up to and including termination.
My other question is, I know that, is your policy for looking at police departments, police who are coming from other departments moving to Salina, is it just as stringent, you know, when you're looking at them to hire? Because there are reports of people who do, you know, who have been reprimanded, who have done this and that, and they move, and they go to another place, and they can do it again. There's not a systematic thing that says this is the things that they've been doing. Do you have things in place to keep people who have done those things from doing that here in Salina?
I would say we even investigate a former cop more so than the average 22-year-old person. And that is because what you're referring to is called a gypsy cop. A gypsy cop goes from town to town to town, and that was a thing, there's no question. Not here, I can assure you, but I'm just saying that is the first red flag you have when somebody's been a cop at 5 different cities in 7 years, right? That's crazy. I mean, I can assure you we're aware of that. We look long and hard at folks who we have been cops before, which obviously they sign a waiver that we literally go to that police department with permission from the applicant, show that department that waiver, and then we pull their personnel file from that department, and we look through every bit of it. I mean, there's no question. Again, that's called being a gypsy cop, and I definitely don't want to hire gypsy cops that are running from their past transgressions. You're welcome.
My name is Jack Hennenkamp. I live at 3155 West Crawford. I'm retired now. I was formerly the Vice President of Facilities at Salina Regional Health Center. I think, working to keep it short, I would say I'm hoping the citizens of Salina and the City Commission does not give any favorable consideration at all to defunding the Salina Police Department. I think every citizen in Salina wants to see responsible spending of every department. We would look forward to seeing that taken. If the police department asks for something that is irresponsible, I think the City Commission should definitely be looking into that and take positive action, as well as the city manager. But beyond that, simply following the cries of defunding that we're seeing nationally is irresponsible to the communities that are served. I'm glad to hear the 1033 program. I think it is an excellent program. I think a lot of the stuff you do get or can get out of there isn't good. I've been in the hospital business for many years, and we also had opportunities sometimes to get equipment that by the time it came to us, it was well past its use or serviceability or even technology that was appropriate. So I would say having that armored vehicle is one of the best things in Salina at this point in time, and I have, in my 44 years in the hospital, know there were times where it was used effectively for the benefit of the citizens of Salina. So I hope that if there are future 1033 purchases, those can be made without any removal of that from the arsenal of tools by the City of Salina and the Police Department. When it comes to the effectiveness of the Citizens Review Board, I don't know, they may be very, very effective. I think if there are legitimate citizens' questions on that, that should be pursued, perhaps, or given consideration pursued, but find that they meet best practices, they've been educated in the best way possible to provide a good review of those practices which they are intended to review. That may be happening. I have no idea or knowledge of that, but if there's a question, I think that would be easy enough to resolve, to check on the membership, what background, what education they should perhaps have, and pursue that if that's beneficial. I do want to say, as one of my responsibilities as Vice President of Facilities at Salina Regional Health Center before retirement was security, and the Salina Police Department could not have been better in their response. And I think not only to Salina Regional Health Center, but so many businesses and places within the community when they were needed, when we needed those folks. And those situations could get well out of hand, and I never saw a police department, a police officer respond inappropriately to those things. The consideration I've seen them given to people on the street is exemplary. Are there bad police officers? Yes. Has Salina had some over the 45 years I've lived in Salina? Probably has. But I think for the most part they're doing a good job, and I have seen many chiefs of police, and every one of them has made Salina a priority for getting the best service they can. So I would hold my remarks to that, but I do want to express that appreciation. And being a police officer is not an easy job, and I saw that many of them save situations, specific resource many times. If the police department can't handle it, it cannot be handled, and we can't call out the national. We can't defund them and call out the National Guard when things get a little bit tougher than some arm twisting might take. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angela Bracalo. I'm a resident of Salina. I am very concerned about the state of the Saline County Law Enforcement Advisory Board. The board is made out to seem like a check on the police department's power, but in reality is nothing more than an organization that lets the police police themselves with the illusion of accountability. Take, for example, the numerous conflicts of interest on this board. The fact that the chair of the advisory board is also on the Police Excellence Fund, an organization that raises private funds to donate to the police. A department's funders cannot be the same people that are supposed to hold them accountable. Or the fact one advisory board member also has a family member on the police force. What will happen when there is an issue presented to the board that concerns this family member? And since any policy changes advocated by this board will have an effect on this person's day-to-day life, can any decisions by this board member really be impartial? Whether or not this man was on the board before his family member was in the police department does not change the effect this has on decision-making. This is not an independent board. And it is also not a public board. With meetings being closed to the public and no mandated release of meeting minutes, which it may not be in the suggested code by the state to do that, would still be good to have that if it's truly going to hold people accountable, there's no way for any of us to know what is going on. And with new board members being chosen by the current pool of board members, there is no way to challenge a board member who is not fulfilling their responsibilities. Moreover, this law enforcement advisory board is toothless. There is no clear indication in the bylaws or any documents we could find that the board has access to all the citizen complaint files or that the police must give them access to any files pertaining to complaints or policies. On top of that, the board can only make non-enforceable recommendations that the police department can choose to accept or reject. We do not know what instances of abuse of power have occurred and not been reported to this board. We do not know what issues the police department has brought to the board, nor the board's responses. We do not know if recommendations have been made and been rejected by the police department. We do know that the board has no real power to enforce its recommendations. And we do know that if the board is primarily or solely relying on police department recommendations for issues to address, they cannot effectively address systemic issues. All of this means that the city has decided that the police can police themselves and effectively only uses this board to deflect questions and concerns about policing. As a resident of Salina, it concerns me that a group of heavily armed individuals given qualified immunity can decide the fates of people in our community with no real checks and balances from us. If we are to rely on an advisory board to identify issues of racial profiling, bias, excessive force, and over-policing, they must be independent, accountable to the public, and be able to enforce their decisions. Because these are real people whose lives can be and are ruined or taken by the complete lack of any checks on the police department's power. And every moment you delay action, you are denying these people justice. And moreover, I want to say that this board is a huge issue, but it is a Band-Aid on this problem. It is something that you look to after something has gone wrong. We know that crimes are not driven by laws, are not just driven independently of other social circumstances. We know that where there are higher poverty rates, there's higher property crime. We know that where people's needs are not being met, they are driven to get those needs met by other means. This means that to actually lower crime, we do not need to fund police. We do not need to have a police budget of $10 million. We need to make sure that everyone in Salina can eat, has shelter, has a safe place away from domestic abuse, and has their needs met otherwise. The police budget is much larger than most other sections of the city's budget, and that is unacceptable. The police are a last resort, as was said in this forum. We should be funding our first resorts first. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone? Okay, come on, ma'am.
Can you hear me with this mask on? Okay, good. My name's Lene Meyer. I'm from Salina, and I absolutely was not going to speak today. Not my favorite thing to do, but I got a phone call from one of the young folks in the activist group. Her name is Blaze, and she called me to ask if I could say a few words. I said, well, I don't think so. And then I got to thinking, okay, Lene, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So as a citizens, we have to speak, whether it goes anywhere or not. And I do believe that all we can do is take the action and let go of the results. I do want to say I respect and thank all the folks that are wearing masks. It shows respect and caring for others, and lots of wisdom, in my opinion. And I heard on the news tonight that the governor said by Friday we all have to be wearing masks when we're out in public. I think I heard that right. I want to thank the young folks that got a lot of this going just from finding the courage to speak out. That was really, really cool. The thing that Blaze had brought up that wanted me to speak to because of my history and my work history working with the mental health and people with addiction issues, she says she feels that there's a need for programming, for education, for support long before people get to that point where they need mental health care or have a breakdown or have addiction issues. And from what I understand, a lot of the people that are arrested for crime committed their crimes when they've been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So that becomes an issue for many. I'm just suggesting, after hearing Blaze's concerns, maybe looking at a big picture in ways our community can address some of these issues. I know there are programs that are happening, but what about wellness programs, things that can happen to educate people that struggle with problems? I think dysfunctional family issues, dysfunctional issues is a generational thing. And I think it's important that we all look in the mirror and take a look at ourselves and see where we need to go to make positive changes. And maybe providing opportunities for some community-wide programs that can help people better understand where they've been, where they need to be, where they need to go to start loving themselves, so they don't have to have a mental breakdown, or they don't have to get into drugs and alcohol as a way to cope. So that's my only thought, and I don't have any idea at this point how that can happen, but I think maybe some brainstorming by a lot of people can make that maybe a possibility. And I really believe that as we find peace within ourselves, we begin to love ourselves, and then we can learn to love others. And as we do that, we all find joy. And I think Salina is a place that hopefully can be open to those. Peace, love, and joy. It's a lot of work, but it's possible. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ebony Morrell. I am also a resident of Salina, 1311 East Magnolia Road, and I also was not planning to come up and speak today. A couple of questions that I have that I don't necessarily expect to be answered, although if you could, that would be great, is regarding the number of arrests that are made in this community and the number of arrests that result in use of force, that the use of force is necessary. What is the percentage of people of color that, what is the breakdown of that, the demographics?
I don't have that at this moment. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. Well, looking at the demographics of Salina, 13.8% of the population are people of color. So I think one thing that would be worthwhile would be looking at those numbers and determining whether the proportion of arrests and the proportion of use of force is in keeping with the demographics of our community. The second thing I want to get at is a broader topic that has been brought up here, and that is, the distribution of wealth or the distribution of resources to different programs within the community. So I grew up in Central Illinois, a demographic very similar to here, a very small town, and use of corporal punishment was still in the schools when I was a child. Even more so before that, my father, who also grew up in Central Illinois, he went to a Catholic school, so there was very heavy use of corporal punishment there. And at the time, he had what we suspect is undiagnosed ADHD. Now, he said back in that day, ADHD wasn't diagnosed. The nuns just beat it out of you. If you were misbehaving, then the answer was to, use corporal punishment until the kids sat in their seat and behaved. These days, we've shifted away from that mode of reinforcement with children, and instead of just automatically applying corporal punishment or having children lined up in front of the principal's office while he gets his paddle out, we've made efforts to diagnose problems that kids have that result in disruptive behavior and learning. Now, that's not to say we've taken away an accountability system altogether, but rather we've come up with solutions to help deal with the problem before it escalates into a more serious problem that requires the use of force. So I do think it's very within our interests as a community to be looking at, first of all, where do the discrepancies lie when it comes, what kinds of arrests are being taken, with what demographics in those arrests, why are they being made, and instead of simply automatically going to the solution of, we need to crack down from the top end, what are the programs that we can invest in that will make more of an impact and reduce the number of escalating incidences to begin with. That's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Mona Hargrave, 704 South 10th Street. I just feel really strongly that there needs to be some clarification of a term that I have heard used here a couple of times this evening. When we talk about defunding the police, I think there is a huge need for some clarification of what that term actually means. I do not think that, as some people seem to think, that it means we're getting rid of the police, that we're taking all their monies away. That's not what it is. Okay, first thing that pops up on Google, defund the police means reallocating or redirecting funding away from the police department to other government agencies funded by the local municipality. That's it. It's that simple. Defund does not mean abolish policing. I think we all need to be very aware of that, because if we take some of that $10 million policing budget and direct it towards mental health services, services that can help those trying to live in poverty, by doing that, we're actually going to make their job easier. Because the police can't go out there and be social workers. That's not part of their deal, really. And when they get called out on a call that involves somebody that is mentally unstable, I know because I've called them for that service before, and they were absolutely no help at all. And I felt terrible for calling them, because the mentally unstable person that I was trying to help didn't get any help at all. And what I was told by the police officer, one of the police officers that showed up, was, hey, it's not against the law to be off your meds. I understand that's not your job, but we need to provide more monies to the agencies that can help with that sort of thing. And so I just want people to quit talking about defunding the police like it's a dirty four-letter word. You need to understand what it really means. It doesn't mean get rid of the police. I just think everybody needs to understand that.
Do we have anyone else? Okay, you're coming.
Brian Frazier of Salina. Just a couple of quick questions. There was a number of use of force events that happened here in Salina. Out of that number, what percentage of, or what number of officers were involved in those incidences? And during those investigations of those instances, was there any disciplinary actions that were taken or needed to be taken for those officers, the number of officers that were involved in that? The other thing is, on several occasions, I've spoken about the number of officers of color within Salina, and that if I had any suggestions on recruiting officers of color, if I could bring those up. Apparently, the process that we have been using for the last 10, 20 years is not working. I know that there are other cities that are able to recruit officers of color, and at that time, I think we were down, the last time I spoke with the chief about this, I think we were down 8 or so officers. Now we're down to where we just need 1. So during that period of time, there has been some recruitment of officers. And what is causing us to not be able to retain or obtain officers of color? Kind of my questions. I can see that we have your lead officers here, or your hierarchy of officers here. I don't see representation of an officer of color in any of those.
There were several questions there. As far as the 167 instances of using force, I can't recall 167 instances of force. What I can say is definitely each is reviewed all the way up to me. It starts with the sergeant and works its way up. If there's video, which oftentimes there is video, video is a really good thing. I mean, folks think the police are scared of video. We're not, because video helps us a lot more than it finds us doing something wrong. I mean, we get so many allegations of something happening, and then you show the video, and that didn't happen. So I'm 100% for body-worn video, for dash cam video. I can say that one thought that comes to mind is if we show an example, or if an example is shown where we use excessive force, I mean, we deal with it appropriately, but I can't give you a blanket answer. Every single person that uses excessive force is fired. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of retraining, sometimes it's a matter of they need to be fired, but you have to look at their past history. One example I can think of where a person was disciplined that just came to mind was the use of our taser. We don't tase people running away unless there's something really horrible occurred or is going to occur. We don't tase people in elevated positions because they fall down and they can't control when they fall and they could be seriously injured. But there was an instance where an officer tased somebody that was basically running away. And to be honest with you, by the grace of God, the person wasn't hurt more, but he ended up landing on concrete, but he wasn't hurt really at all. But that was an example where the video clearly showed that the tasing should not have happened, and that officer was disciplined for it. He was also retrained, because again, it's a 13-page use of force policy. There's a whole lot in there, and sometimes retraining is what's needed along with the appropriate discipline. But I'm a firm believer in the discipline that I give out. It's the least necessary to correct their behavior. You just can't fire everybody that makes a mistake, because we all make mistakes, depending on the mistake that's made. But I'm seeing, generally speaking, that's how I deal with discipline.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I keep hearing you say that your response to excessive use is retraining, depending on what the situation is. At what time or length for your officers do you not just retrain them in their regular rigmarole of doing their career? Like, do they have to do something wrong in order to get retrained, to get updated with new techniques, or do you wait for something to happen?
And I don't recall using the term retrain more than just the last time I used it, but with that said, most of the stuff, as I said, everything on our belt that we use when we're applying force, we're retrained, as I showed on the slide, annually. Anything you see on an officer's belt, some people call it a bat belt, but everything that's on there, we're retrained annually. So absolutely, we recognize those are what we have to be the most proficient at, is what we wear on our belt. Every instance is different as far as if you're talking specifically about excessive force. I mean, every instance is different. They're not the same. So we have to look at every instance differently, and it certainly includes past similar behavior. That's huge. If they have a pattern of using excessive force, they're not going to be a Salina police officer for very long. That's just the way it is. But we do make mistakes. We're human, and if they make a mistake and it appears something that wasn't malicious, they weren't the Minneapolis thing, for example, that was horrible. But if it's just a mistake and the retraining will ensure, or at least try to ensure, that it doesn't happen again, that is what we do along with the proper discipline.
Right. I've heard you say annually. I'm just talking about within that year. If something were to, do you wait and say, hey, well, this happened and we're retraining, your annual training's coming up next month, this is what we really want you to work on, or do you pull them aside at that point in time and say, this is where we need to work on it now?
That's a great question. And actually, what comes to mind is defensive driving. We should be good drivers, right? We all expect us to be good drivers. We also drive 20 times more in the average year than the average citizen drives, so we are going to be involved in accidents, unfortunately. But at the time, if we have an at-fault incident, like we just had one a couple weeks ago, that officer did receive a citation, just like I would have got or you would have received. He was issued a citation, and he is going to be attending defensive driving school as soon as possible. I mean, he has to go to KLETC, he has to go away, so it's kind of at their beckoning when we can do it, when they have the training. But definitely we don't let it just sit there. We handle it as quick as we can with the proper retraining.
Okay, and then my other question in regards to training is, I know it was deemed as police officers aren't social workers, but how do you, the field that you are in are social, so how do you treat, or not treat, but how do you train for the dealing with civilians that do have mental illnesses, or people that do, like, let's say, have autism, that will not respond necessarily to a situation as one would expect the average civilian to respond to?
And that's another great question. I'm not real fond of saying I, but what I will say is before I arrived here, we didn't have crisis intervention training, okay? And that's 40 hours of training. And if I could boil down what crisis intervention training is in one sentence or more or less, it's basically the ability to recognize somebody who's having a mental health crisis. Where in years past, we really struggled with that. We saw somebody acting whatever, strange, goofy, well then he must be committing a crime. And we did not act accordingly, but it's because we didn't know what we didn't know. We train our officers now to recognize when somebody is having a mental health crisis between the 40-hour CIT, crisis intervention training, or there's an abbreviated 8-hour mental health first aid. That's just the bare minimum of what we require. They're also taught it in KLETC2 during basic training. I'm trying to get the entire force trained in CIT training, but I have to start with the patrol division because they're the ones who see the most people on a daily basis that may be experiencing those types of issues. But that takes money, that takes training, and it takes time. I have to have an officer be gone for 5 days training, which again, I fully understand the part of defund doesn't mean get rid of the police, but defund does take some of your budget away, and it's hard to take a large amount of our budget away, but still demand that we have the proper training. That's where I struggle in my mind. But I'm fully aware that defund the police does not mean get rid of the police. I definitely get that.
Right. Okay. Oh, my time's up. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. What is your name?
Johnny. Johnny.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't say that.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mayor, governing body, Reverend Davison. Good to make your acquaintance. My name is John Blanchard. I'm a resident of Salina. I have gray hair, but, you know, in my generation might say that, you know, I belong to the club of, hey, it's not broken, let's don't fix it. And, you know, everything's great. But, unfortunately, times change, and it simply isn't the case. I'd like to point out real quick, because a lot of folks are really quick to jump to, if you have a criticism or a concern, that somehow you're on one side and somebody else is on the other side. I think we run the risk of overzealous supporters really causing more problems than they're helping here. I've brought up a number of issues at city commission meetings, and so I just want to address a couple of those and see if there have been any answers to those questions that I've had. I'd like to also say that as a former mayor and former city commissioners, I think that the chief knows, and I think every police officer knows or should know that was on the force at the time, that I 100% have always supported our police officers, current and former. I've attended graduation ceremonies at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, and I've attended many retirements, some of the folks that I recognize in the back here. Appreciate all of them. I also appreciate the young people that have come out to voice their concerns. I think we need to listen to them. They do their research, they come with facts. I don't always do that, but they have. And so a couple of the things that I've brought up and that I would like to ask, and I just want to say, Chief, I appreciate you sitting up there and taking questions. I appreciate that. My questions, however, for the governing body, and I'll address them to the chair. Mr. Mayor, I had come and asked about a comprehensive plan of racial profiling and bias-based comprehensive plan, and still have not received one, still have not seen one. Does one exist?
That I'll have to ask the police chief. I have not seen it yet either.
Okay, because I'll just say this, I'm a land planner, and so I'm very familiar with comprehensive plans, and comprehensive plans bring together all of your policies and all of your wants and desires, and then they set forth your path to accomplish what it is you want to accomplish. I completely appreciate that we have a lot of policies in place, but we have also answered on numerous Attorney General questionnaires if we had a racial bias comprehensive plan, and the answer has always been yes, and nobody seems to be able to find that. So I hope that we can get to a point where we can differentiate between a policy and a plan, because what the comprehensive plan, I think, does for you as a governing body is that one of the speakers before me mentioned that we ask the police officers in the department to do a lot of things that are way outside of their expertise. When we have policies in community development and economic development that are unsuccessful and they inadvertently harm people in vulnerable communities and people with lower incomes, we raise poverty rates, we raise crime rates, and we make the job of a police officer much more difficult. I would ask that one of the things that we achieve out of this whole process is a comprehensive plan. Is a comprehensive plan to make policing more of a prevention exercise and less of an enforcement exercise. Everybody's safer there. The consumer and and the provider. So one thing that I would ask you, Mr. Mayor, to hopefully commit to is that on our advisory boards and on our citizen advisory boards that you provide greater oversight, you create a process that is more inclusive and more transparent so that everyone can participate. And we need to just work towards providing a higher degree of public trust, because that public trust will transfer and trickle down to our officers and make the cop on the street much safer. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Warren Redmond. I'm actually a citizen of Lynchburg, but I go to attend church in Salina. My wife works at Salina Regional Healthcare Center, so we spend a lot of time in Salina. And I heard the police chief, Chief Nelson, refer to Ferguson. Well, we're actually native of St. Louis, Missouri, Ferguson, Florissant district. And having experienced turmoil with the police or with law enforcement, bear with me, I got just a bunch of thoughts, but one thing that I want to quote was Chief Nelson saying that you and your officers were scared of being hurt. Can't remember the actual context you used it in, but you used it here tonight saying that you were afraid of being hurt, but you had to do a job. And so I asked, you and the board and those are taxpayers, if we have officers who are afraid of being hurt or a police chief who is afraid of being hurt by the public, then consider and you all have the funding or the law on your side, and what I found out tonight, $10 million of resources. Those of us who are under your authority when we're out in day-to-day action. So that was one thing that I just wanted to throw out there for consideration. Also, I wanted to know if you, as the chief of police, were familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, in which there was an experiment held at the University of Stanford, California. I can't remember the year, but I would just say that is worth looking into for you and your officers to just show the mentality of those in authority. So the Stanford prison experiment is something that I did want to throw out there. Also, a couple questions. What initiatives or programs are law enforcement taking to ensure trust with the community? What things are law enforcement doing in training? What type of trainings are they doing to ensure that they are prepared to deal with citizens who they have no connection with? Some grow up in poverty, some grow up not in poverty, but a lot of, again, to ensure that things such as the George Floyd doesn't happen here in Salina or in central Kansas or in the state of Kansas. And so in ensuring trust, I had another question. I attended the George Floyd vigil here that happened maybe a month or so ago, in which one thing I spoke to my wife about was that I did not see any law enforcement there, and I did not attend the protest or the walk the following day. But then again, there were members from my church, including my bishop, Pastor Stephen Davison, and his family, who attended but did not recognize any law enforcement in attendance. And so in trying to, as the last gentleman spoke, ensure trust and to come together, what things are being done to show solidarity for the people who are underrepresented, for the people who are facing injustices. And then just my last point, in the defunding the police, again, I'm not for it one way or the other, but I would like to know what type of things, if defunding the police is something that's being spoke about, what are we doing with, how do we reallocate those funds into the community? Because I worked as a substitute teacher in the Lakewood district, which is probably one of the lower income in Salina, and the thing that I noticed, there wasn't a lot of initiative or activity for those families, for those students to be a part of outside of illegal activity. So that was my time, and that's just what I wanted to leave the board and the police chief with.
There's a lot. There was a lot said there, and it's kind of, I was trying to write down some of the questions that I wrote down. As far as, I don't believe I said about being injured. What I said is we accept that we could be injured. We accept that we could be injured, and we know that going into the job. So I'm not saying we sit around and worry about being injured, because if that was the case, when I made reference to that, we wouldn't leave the police station. Do I want to be injured? No. Do I want my cops to be injured? Absolutely not. But we don't sit around and worry about being injured, but we have to be aware that we could be injured, and we accept that. I've heard, no particular order here, but I keep on hearing the $10 million. That is true. We have a $10 million budget. Keep in mind we are one of the largest agencies, departments in Salina. But folks, you have to realize that 93% of that $10 million is to pay for the police officers, salary and benefits. So 93% of that is for salary and benefits. So if defund the police doesn't mean get rid of cops, that means 93% of that $10 million is already spoken for. Again, I'm not saying it doesn't mean get rid of police officers, because I read about, again, the defund the police. Some of it has to do with SROs, and there's other communities that have taken SROs out of schools. I personally believe that's a mistake, but if that's something that people want, then of course we'll talk about it. But that's part of the defund the police I've heard, where possibly they were talking about reducing the forces. But that 7% of discretionary funds that we actually have to spend on other things represents about $800,000 is what it is. It's a little bit less than that. So the $10 million does sound impressive, but again, 93% is for salary and benefits to employ 114 employees, and I'm counting civilians. So we have 84 officers if we are full, and we have 30 or 31 civilian. So the majority of that goes towards salary and benefits. The gentleman that brought this up, is the prison study you were talking about, is that where the student or the college student became prison guards, and they were acting like, yeah, that's several years ago, but that is very interesting. Basically, these college students became prison guards and wore everything like they were prison guards, and over a matter of time, they started treating the prisoners extremely poorly, when a day before that, they were your average college student. So that is I don't know what the name of the study is, but I have read that. That's horrible as far as what humans can do if given authority and power, and over a period of time they evolve into that. That's horrendous. But that's probably over a decade ago, but that's a very good study. I wish I knew what it's called. What is it called? Thank you, sir. Stanford Prison Experience. Yeah, that's worth reading. I'm trying to think of the other things you asked as far as building trust. I think we've tried to do that since day one. I think every police chief does. We've had a lot of initiatives where we're trying to get out there with the community, and I'm talking about our Bigs and Blue program with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Coffee with a Cop, Fishing with a Cop. I mean, Tip a Cop, Special Olympics. I mean, we've done a lot of things trying to get out there, which I hope transpires to building trust with the community that we serve. I mean, we are definitely trying to do what police departments, once the vehicle became part of the police department's arsenal, for lack of a better term, and once the cops got in cars, all of a sudden you lose the neighborhood cop, you lose the cop walking around. Now you have what's been termed drive-by policing, where we're in our car, we drive by and wave at you. That's been going on for a long time. trying to get out of our cars and talk to people to build trust. That's my philosophy. That's what I've said many, many times.
And I would add, we've had those conversations, and you also have to balance that with the staffing challenges that we've had. So as we're successful in our recruitment and our retention, I think that creates an opportunity for the community-based policing that Chief described. The other thing, just with respect to the dialogue and the conversation, I think some people have made the points here that the focus is on the police department, but there are issues well beyond just the police department, and that's a dialogue that I don't know has been strong and consistent in the community. So we're trying to get that built as well. This took precedent, and I've started reaching out to community leaders and trying to kind of put together a strategy to kind of foster those conversations and make sure that we have a broad representation in the community that's able to participate in that. So that's something that we recognize we're going to need to continue to have these law enforcement and police department specific conversations, the topics that we've identified just from prior conversations exceed what we can talk about tonight. But then there's a bigger picture conversation about some of the things that have come up in terms of social services and mental health and income and equity type issues that it all interrelates, and we need to find a way to foster that conversation.
Well, go ahead. We would take this last one.
James Bowden, Salina, Kansas. As a white person, I'm not afraid to call the police. I've called them for many reasons, including very serious ones that could have resulted in the end of my life. I trust that when I call for help, they will be there to protect me and the people I care about. The problem is, that is my privilege as a middle-class white American. If the ability to be unafraid to interact with an officer were the case for everybody, we wouldn't be here tonight. This is not the case for people of color in America. We've seen that anything can trigger an officer to willingly put someone's life in danger using the tactics that they were trained to use, regardless of whether the detained person poses an imminent threat to their life. Until any person outside the normative standard of Caucasian male can feel equally assured that when they're going to interact with an officer of the law, that they will be respected and treated like the human beings that we all are, we have a duty to continually scrutinize the actions of the police and the policies of our cities, whether it's on our doorsteps or 1,000 miles away. We have an opportunity right now to take a serious look at our entire law enforcement system and ask ourselves, where is there room for improvement? This is our duty as citizens of this community to ensure that we protect everyone, to ensure all lives matter, right? But until we recognize that Black lives matter, Latino lives matter, LGBTQ lives matter, protesters' lives matter, and make policy changes that ensure their lives matter, all lives matter is only a dog whistle to white America. My solution for these issues is to listen to these people here tonight, the young people especially, to take them seriously and implement the changes they are proposing. By failing to do so, our community will remain in a state of ignorance and complacency, while the rest of America will be thinking critically about how to change the system for the better. We will be faced with these issues in the future, so let's take the time to prepare now in order to navigate them fairly and equitably for all people, not just white people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you to all the participants that had questions or comments, but I want to leave you with this, since I'm the moderator, and I think I can have like 180 seconds to say something. I've heard the word trust over the last two individuals. I've heard the word, if the gentleman said that he's a white American, he can call the police and he doesn't feel intimidated. This is not anti-police, believe you me. But I want to take you back somewhere that happened back in 1863 when the abolishment of slavery took place. And during that time, obviously, there were laws that were made that free slaves, if they were loitering, if they didn't have places to live, these individuals were put in jail. And during this time, there were many police officers that were hired to do this. And sometimes we ask the question, where does the distrust come, especially for African Americans? But once that took place, black people in general, when they saw the police, that meant either I'm going to jail or I may lose my life. And over times of generations and generations, those things still stuck with, because that is the stories that our grandparents and great-grandparents told us. During this particular time as well, obviously there were laws, the Black Code or the Jim Crow, that when these individuals were caught or when they were committed a crime, and if you read the 13th Amendment, it talks about slavery being abolished, is just paraphrasing, abolished unless there was a crime committed. But during the time these people committed crimes and they could not pay the fines, they were put in jail, they were put in prison. And during this time, they were leased out to the plantation owners, whether it was from the county or whether it was from the state. And the county and the state was making money off of this. So the thing that have the distrust or between African Americans and officers, whether they're black or white officers, the thing of it is that it stems from years ago. And I believe until we can have the hard conversations, difficult conversations, as what we can do as individuals. It's not at the feet of just one individual or one sector of people, but it's at the feet of us as a whole. And when we look at that as individuals, and when we look at how we can do better, 50 years ago, my father had this conversation with me. 50 years ago, he said, son, it's going to get better. I have a granddaughter that's 7 years old today, right now, actually. In 50 years, I do not want her to have to be sat in the audience or on the podium having this same discussion as what we can do better. I believe as an individual, as a supporter, as a proud American, as a Desert Storm vet, as one who fought for my country, as one who had uncles and great uncles that fought for this country, I believe that change starts with the person in the mirror. We have to see ourselves different. I have served as a chaplain. I rode with many police officers. I talked to the chief about this today. I rode with many. We had really open conversations that I would not divulge because it was a conversation that I had with those individuals. But what I'm saying today is that, and I hope you didn't think you was going to get away without at least one scripture from the Bible. Out of Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, in the 11th verse, the Bible says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." I believe each of us that is in this building, I think I counted 119 people, maybe off a little bit. But for each individual that is here, I think we want better for our children than we experience. And the only way that we're going to have better for our children than we experience, we have to evaluate ourselves, see what the issue is, and not be afraid to say, I was wrong. Not be afraid to say, wow, we can do something different. So, as of a whole, I think as a whole and Salina, I think we have a very good community. But if we want to be better, it changes with the man or the woman in the mirror. So, again, thank you all. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mike, for allowing me to moderate this. And thank you to the commissioners for the opportunity. But I think that we have to go deeper. And there were phenomenal questions asked tonight. There was phenomenal statements. But I think we have to go deeper in order for my granddaughter at age 57 not to be dealing with the same question that my father talked to me about 50 years ago.
City Commission, I'd like to thank all those who attended today, and thank you for your remarks. We will be taking these under consideration, and again, the five of us do not have all the answers. We will be soliciting more public comment. I think the words of wisdom from Bishop Stephen Davison prove that we need individuals like him involved in these conversations. We again thank you, Bishop Davison, for your time, for your leadership here tonight, and also for your words of wisdom. Also, I'd like to thank Matt Thompson and Kansas Wesleyan University for allowing us to use this facility. It gave us the chance to social distance a little bit and to have this number of individuals attend. We will probably, I'm guessing, have at least one more session, and we will, as a commission, begin to start to massage this information and see how we move forward. With that, I believe we are done for this evening. I do need a motion for adjournment. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for attending.